Today I'm going to show you how to start Bucks Point, Buckinghamshire point ground lace. And the first exercise that we generally do is how to get to grips with the point ground, which you find in virtually all Bucks Point patterns. This pattern is taken from my Bucks Point Lace workbook, although the basic pattern can be found in many Bucks Point books. I have enlarged it slightly so that you can actually see it on the video, but this is the actual point ground strip from the pattern in the book. It's quite nice and neat, and it's a good exercise in getting to grips with the point ground. You also have the head side on the left with picots and the foot side on the right with a nice straight change of worker edge. This pattern takes 13 pairs of bobbins, so not too many to get you started. Your first diagonal row of pinholes is the row of pinholes you're going to work first, but we need some temporary support pins at the back. So I'm just going to put a couple of pins in. The first one will actually be a working pin that's on the foot side, and then one at the back. The one at the back you hang 2 pairs on, side by side. The edge one hang 2 pairs on in open formation, or rainbow style as some people would say. Now you want to put 2 twists on, or 3 twists even, on one pair. And this is the inside pair is going to work through the 2 passives you've just hung on. These 2 passives will stay in this edge foot side trail. Once you've cloth stitched through, put 3 twists on. This is going to be going into point ground. Hang another pin at the back and hang one on for your first point ground stitch. To work a point ground stitch, we do a half stitch and 2 twists. Now this first one is a catch pin, so instead of putting the pin between the 2 pairs you've worked with, you actually put it against the passives on the right and to the right of the 2 pairs worked. The right hand pair will then come back through these 2 passives to do the next edge stitch. We're going to leave that for a moment and put another pair of passives. I'm going to leave that for a moment and put another pair on to do the next stitch. So again, it's a point ground stitch, half stitch and 2 twists. This time you put the pin between them, and generally this is the position you will put it in, between the 2 pairs. Now in point ground you do not cover the pin, and this is the one thing that catches most people out when they come to Bucks Point from another lace. So no covering the pin, the next pair on to work in the line. Now you work diagonally downhill. In this case, because the pattern is sloping to the left, we're going to work downhill to the left. But once it's established, if it's more comfortable, you can actually work from the top of the line downhill to the right. Just maintain the direction that you prefer to work in throughout the whole piece until you get the hang of it. So again, a point ground stitch, pin between the 2 pairs, and do not cover the pin. And these you can drop them down off the support pin each time you've worked the stitch. Because they're in half stitch, they are over the pin you've put in. And we continue to do that down the line. We now hang the last 2 pairs on a temporary support pin, and these will form the passives on the head side edge. they're hung on the support pin side by side. The last point ground pair that you've worked with, we cloth stitch through and work a picot on the edge, which is 5 twists before and 2 after. And then cloth stitch back through and put 3 twists on, ready to enter the point ground again. Now I wouldn't take that last temporary support pin out until I've got the next one in on the edge. Now we work from the right hand side downhill, gently moving them back to keep them in order, which is a challenge at times when you first start. Now if you can see on this edge, just try and move it slightly. You can see now on this edge we have this pair that we started off with that's around the catch pin. This one's going to come out to work the edge stitch and then back through to do the next catch pin. So we've got 2 passives, cloth stitch through the 2 passives, put 2 twists on, put your pin up and then work the change of worker edge. So cloth stitch, 2 twists on the inside one and 3 on the outside. The extra twists on the outside edge makes a firmer edge for attaching to fabric at a later stage. Cloth stitch back through, 3 twists on because it's going into point ground, and then half stitch and 2 twists for the point ground stitch. Again it's one attached to the edge trail, so it's a catch pin to the right of the 2 pairs. Now quite often it's easier to actually just take those 2 temporary support pins out. Now we can just gently drop them down. Quite often it's easier to do that edge pair, the edge pin, at this stage because then you know where it is. You take it back out and work the edge one. 2 twists, pin up. Now you'll notice I'm leaning the outside edge pins outside and the outside on the other side, on the head side. This helps your tension. Work the change of worker edge and work it back through. It's then ready to start the next row when you come to it. Okay, so we're going to continue down this line and towards the head side in point ground. Remembering not to cover the pin. As I say, it's the biggest challenge that people find when coming to Bucks Point from other laces because there's very few laces that you don't cover the pin in for a ground stitch. In torsion you do, and many of the others such as Flanders, there's very few stitches that you don't cover the pin with. And even experienced workers, I made a fan and I found right at the start accidentally I'd covered 1 pin, and it really does shout out at you. So it's a good exercise to do this and do it until you're comfortable in working the stitches, because it will make a tremendous difference. Now on the head side edge, generally you won't have just this straight edge into it, but because it is straight passives, I was always taught that when you have an edge like this with passives that are vertical, or it could be a gimp line, if it's a vertical edge you should make a catch pin. So again the pin goes to the left this time, next to the passives, to maintain the straightness of them. Otherwise it can very easily pull in when you tension it. You're doing the picot, keep that first loop loose as you take it around the pin, and then you can put your 2 twists on afterwards. And again, now I can drop the last temporary support pin down, it's supported properly, and take it back through. I always get it to the point where you're ready to do the next pinhole, so that you know where your pairs are for it. And you can now see the point ground stitch working. Again, move them across the left and start on the right hand side. Because we did the edge stitch before, we're now ready to go straight into the point ground. But bear in mind, remember, that first one is attached to the outside edge, so it's a point ground, a catch pin, not a point ground stitch. And again, I would take it back out and back in. It's personal preference. Once you get to grips with it, you'll find your own way, which order you prefer to work it in. And as long as you remember to do those catch pins, that's fine. I always like to have the stitches ready there to work when I return to the top. I did enlarge this pattern slightly, as you'll be able to see when I put the original alongside it. Try and make it a little bit easier to see it on the video. Now there you can see what I've done. I've put it in as a normal point ground stitch when it should be a catch pin, that last one. You really have to focus on this, remember to do catch pins on the edge, and it's to maintain the vertical. If I'd have put that in the normal position, it could pull these threads off vertical and you get a little bit of a nibbled look, which we don't want. Now Bucks Point is worked on a number of different angles. It doesn't have a set angle like torsion does at 45 degrees. Bucks Point can be worked between 52 and 70 degree grid, and it's very interesting once you get into doing the work if you redraft some of the patterns on a different angle. The biggest difference you will see is where it elongates a design. If you've got a flower, it will elongate the design and make a much different motif. The point ground, it's not as easily recognisable. This first one in the book I've actually drafted at 52 degrees. Generally you find the narrow laces, the baby laces, are at 52 degrees. As they get wider they progress up to 55 or 56 degrees. Something like a fan could be on 60 degrees. And a very wide flounce is often up to 70 degrees. It's very interesting to look and measure the old laces and see which they used. You now continue to work diagonally downhill until you've done enough where you can get to grips with this stitch. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If it helps you, drop me a comment and subscribe for more videos coming soon. Thanks for watching.